Hello, Math 7 students. We are starting Module 2, Lesson 15. And in my table of contents, it is called Applying the Properties of Operations to Multiplying and Dividing Rational Numbers. And we find that on page 73 in my comp book. Here is page 73 in my comp book. Applying the properties of operations to multiply and divide rational numbers. You guys have been learning about the properties for a very, very long time, like even back into when you were in second grade. So hopefully you will recognize some of these as we go over them today. Our goal is, today we will use the properties of operations to multiply and divide rational numbers. The question that I want you to be thinking about during this lesson is, how can using the properties help you multiply and divide the rational numbers? All right, and then things to know. We kind of have a pretty big list, so I'll go ahead and uncover it, and we'll just talk through it as I go. The properties are helpful when multiplying and dividing rational numbers because we can rearrange the terms to combine them more easily. So basically, the properties that we're going to be using help us move parts of the math sentence around so that they can be completed in an easier way. The first one that you know about is the commutative property of multiplication. The commutative property of multiplication allows you to change the order that you multiply. So, for example, if we had this math sentence right here, and it says negative 2 times 3/8 times 4 times 5/7, one way to make the problem easier is to rewrite it so that the types of numbers being multiplied are grouped together in a different order. So I decided it would be easier if I put the fractions together and then I put the integers together, and then you can solve from there. Because it's a lot easier for me to know that a negative 2 times a positive 4 gives me a negative 8, and then once I have negative 8, I can multiply it by each of the fractions, and then that gives me an easier way of finding the answer. Another property that is very useful when we're working with rational numbers is the multiplicative inverse. This property says that dividing numbers is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Now, you have been working with that one for a long time. It means that if you're dividing something, all you have to do is multiply it by the reciprocal. So if we're going to do that with this one, I'll show you what it would look like. So right here, the only time that you can apply this property is if you have division. Okay, so we have 6. This says divided by 2/3 times negative 8 times 3 divided by negative 1/2. So what we're looking at in making this problem easier for us is, this is division. So we keep this number because that's what we're starting with, but instead of dividing, we can multiply the reciprocal. Multiply by the reciprocal. Well, the reciprocal of 2/3, all you have to do is trade places with the denominator and the numerator, and it becomes 3/2. So now we're taking 6 divided by 1 times 3 divided by 2 times negative 8 divided by 1 times 3 divided by 1. Again, this is division, so we can change that to multiplication, but we have to remember the only way we can change them is if we multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to trade places with the 2 and the 1, so now it becomes negative 2 divided by 1. Okay, so now it's a pretty easy problem because all you have to do is multiply straight across. Okay, so we have 1 times 2 times 1 times 1 times 1. Well, that's pretty simple. 1 times 2 is 2, times 1 is 2, times 1 is 2, times 1 is 2. So now I know my denominator was 2. This is where it gets a little trickier, but we can do it. We can go 6 times 3 is 18. Then we have to multiply it by a negative 8, right? So we'll do the math. 8 times 8 is 64. Regroup the 6. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 6 is 14. A positive times a negative gives me a negative. So now I know that all three of these numbers make negative 144. So then I take the next number and I take negative 144 and I multiply it by 3 because that's the next number in the left to right format. So we have 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 4 is 12 plus 1 is 13. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. So we have a positive and a negative. So I'm left with a negative, so my answer is negative. So now I have that, and I have one more to go. And my one more to go is negative 432 times a negative 2. Okay, so I have 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. My helpful triangle, I have a negative and a negative. So I'm left with a positive, so the answer has to be positive. So the answer would be 864. Now, you're almost done, okay? So then the last step is, can we simplify this? And the answer is, of course. So you're going to take 864, divide it by 2. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 6 3 times. And 2 goes into 4 2 times. So the answer to this long thing up here is 432. Okay? So the thing that's really cool about multiplicative inverse is you can make division problems into multiplication problems by multiplying by the reciprocal. You have to remember, you cannot just change it to multiply and then keep this the same. You have to make it the reciprocal. You have to make it the reciprocal, okay? So multiplicative inverse is when you can take a dividing problem, turn it into a multiplying problem by multiplying by the reciprocal, okay? Now, I know you've learned that before, but that was just a little review to help you out. We're turning the page because we have one more property that we need to talk about very quickly. So again, I started a new page, so I write the title up at the top, Applying the Properties of Operations to Multiply and Divide Rational Numbers. The last property that we need to look at is the distributive property. So this property requires you to multiply a given amount by all the other given terms, okay? So if we're going to work on this together, we have 16, and that's the number that is being distributed. It's the number that has to be multiplied by everything inside. So inside we have a negative 3/8 plus a 1/4, okay? Then, once we figure out what this answer is, we then have to add it to another distributing situation where the 3 has to be multiplied by everything inside. So 3 has to be multiplied by 9/12 plus 3 has to be multiplied by a negative 5/15. Okay? So we're going to chunk this out and we're going to work through it together so that you understand. So the first thing we have to remember is 16 has to be multiplied by this one and by this one. Okay? So let's write it. We have 16 times negative 3/8. So that's this part, plus, because this says plus, 16 times a 1/4. Okay? So this is all of this spread out. Bring down this big plus, so we remember that we have to add it to this one over here. We have 3 times 9/12 plus 3 times a negative 5/15. Okay? So that's just spreading it out so we can see it and work with it. Then you do what it says. So we do 16 times a negative 3. So we have a positive and a negative, right? So what we're left with is a negative. So down here we're going to write negative 16 times 3. 16 times 3 is 48. So we have 48. And then 1 times 8 is 8. So that's what we have with that one. Plus 16 times 1 is 16. 1 times 4 is 4. Bring down your big plus. 3 times 9 is 27. 27. And 1 times 12 is 12. Plus 3 times negative 5. So we have to use our helpful triangle. We have a positive and a negative. So we're left with a negative. So it would be a negative. 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 15 is 15. So that's what we have. Okay, we're still not done. We got to keep going. Now it says that we can simplify these even more. So negative 48 divided by 8. So I have a negative and a positive. So I'm left with a negative, and I know that negative 48 divided by 8 gives me a negative 6, plus 16 divided by 4 is 4, plus 27/12. We could simplify that, dividing both of them by 3, and we get 9/4, so that's helpful, plus negative divided by a positive gives me a negative, so I have, again, a negative. 15 divided by 15 is 1. Okay? So we're getting there. We're getting closer. So now I have a negative, or I have 6 negatives. Negative, 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 negative. 6 negatives, right? And we're adding 4 positives. So 1, 2, 3, 4. They're positives. So I have 0 pairs. And I'm left with 2 negatives. So on this side, I have negative 2 plus 9/4 plus a negative 1. Well, we can do this with a number line, right? Right? So we have 9/4. So we're going to say this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3, and then we're going to divide them into fourths, right? And then, so if this is 1, this is going to be, actually, let's not do 1, 2, and 3. Let's do 0. 9/4. So where did we land? At 5/4. 2/4. So have a line to help us. Negative 7/4, 4, 5. That's using the distributive property to help you. Hopefully that makes sense to you and you figured it all out. We're going to practice. So don't feel overwhelmed and don't feel scared. We are going to practice with these because this is what you have to be able to do. All of these are rational numbers, and this is what you have to be able to do. All right, so let's go back to our goal so that we haven't forgotten what we were supposed to do today. Today we will use the properties of operations to multiply and divide rational numbers. We have the commutative property, the multiplicative inverse property, and we have the distributive property. How can using properties help you multiply and divide rational numbers? The biggest answer to this one is they allow you to change the order of the numbers to make them easier. All right, my dears, you will have some practice problems to do in class tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Bye!